According to Wikipedia, California has the strictest gun laws in the United States, with no provisions in their state constitution to protect the right to keep and bear arms. Up next, the California gun roster. In 2022, California witnessed over 1 million gun sales, despite the strict restrictions from a gun roster. The purpose of this California gun roster was to reduce the number of firearm deaths and crime while promoting safety. Enacted in 1999, this Unsafe Handgun Act gave the state the power to dictate which handgun may be sold by way of passing the following. The manufacturer needs to pay $200 per model, then submit 3 samples for testing. 6 drops onto concrete from 39.8 inches, a 20-round firing test, a 600-round stress test, and then most recently added are 3 required safeties: a chamber load indicator, magazine disconnect mechanism, and something that will microstamp a spent case in 2 locations, identifying it to the gun. Has the California Attorney General lost the true spirit of the Unsafe Handgun Act? Recently, I caught up with a mentor and longtime competitive shooter, Lance Boland of Fast OC, who believes the California Attorney General has. Joining us today is Lance Boland for Fast OC. Thank you for taking this interview.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Seems that you were fast becoming the household name in the defensive gun community.
Well, I would hope the gun community for California. That's really what we're doing it for. It's, the CCW carriers, defensive gun users, we're limited with what we've got. Opening up the market a little bit more, getting more guns in, getting more modern firearms in is kind of the big push for me.
So the reason why I came by was just to find out a little bit more about the gun roster and everything that's attached to that, if I may.
Yeah.
So they were talking about a safe gun. I was just wondering, what exactly are they defining as a safe gun?
Well, the state's argument is that the Unsafe Handgun Act that put into place some restrictions on guns that can be sold in California have to have certain features.
So which brings us to the roster.
Which created a roster of guns that manufacturers have submitted that meet those requirements, starting with magazine disconnects. You're going to see it listed a couple different ways: CLI, LCI. It's the loaded chamber indicator. I think the state has taken it as chamber load indicator, and it has to have certain features on it. It has to have clearly visible text or marking, something red. Think of the M&P Shield or the California version of the 226 from SIG that says, if up, chamber loaded. So it has to have some type of instructions or some marker delineation on there.
Doesn't all of the guns have safety features built into them when they get out of the manufacturer?
Well, not well. I mean, the argument is revolvers, right? So where's the mechanical safety on a revolver? Well, I mean, ultimately it's up to you, right? Yeah, it's this.
Okay.
Right? We go back to Black Hawk Down. This is not safety, right? So, and that's honestly our argument. We put whether you throw the NRA rules at the court or you throw the Cooper rules at the court, they all include, that, treat every gun as if it were loaded. So they're, that's kind of our argument to loaded chamber indicator as well as other arguments. The other one is the magazine disconnect, which a lot of people have a lot of issues. It was flawed in concept in the argument for its purpose, saying that, the angle that they're pushing is, law enforcement wanted it that if they were ever involved in a physical altercation and someone tried to remove the gun, they could drop the magazine out and the gun wouldn't fire. And law enforcement that we've talked to, that I've worked with, that I've trained with, have all said that this is the last thing I want. If I'm in the middle of a reload and I've got a mag out going for a mag in and an opportunity presents itself, why would I not want to be able to the gun.
Right. Their life is on the line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So a lot of the concepts are flawed. Were they put out there? Sure. And what did an agency say? We want this, or can we try this? Absolutely. It's why you see the little notch in front of the in the Glock magazines.
Right.
You know, for I think it's Gen 4s, and that's something the FBI wanted.
Right.
Like they need to reach in there and strip the magazine out. And people were like, that sucks. I don't want that on my gun anymore. And that's what the industry has said. You know, you look across, the popular handguns on a national scale, and they don't have those features. And for defensive shooters, it's, that the two steps. It's get the gun out of the holster, pull the trigger. I want the gun to go off. I want to be able to stop a threat.
Right.
So
That is so bizarre.
yeah.
So it only applies to civilians.
It only applies to civilians, which is another part of our argument for this case, and which Boland v. Bonta, I guess we should probably put the case name out there, that law enforcement is exempt, private party transfers are exempt, interfamilial transfers are exempt, especially those coming from out of state into the state. So what is it that you're trying to prevent, and what are you trying to make safe? So without getting into the Bruin analysis of text history and tradition for how Second Amendment cases are evaluated or now need to be evaluated is, well, this is keeping the public safe, but can the public get these? Yes. Well, okay, well, what are you doing? So you're just trying to isolate a very particular element of the sales, which is from FFLs and new handguns, but they can still get them. So if you're going to ban something, which you can't,
Right.
it's a backdoor ban. And in our case, the very first evidentiary hearing for our injunction, our preliminary injunction, you could see that the judge caught onto it real quick that it's a backdoor gun ban, poorly executed, but they're trying to hang on to it. And then they threw the micro stamping on there years later, and that's kind of where it was when it all started.
Is there even that technology out in the manufacturer community?
Well,
yet,
two
or?
parts. Does it exist? Yes, it exists.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, microstamping does exist. It absolutely exists. Is it feasible or functional for manufacturers? And that answer is no. So is it functional for what the state argues it would be used for, which is to aid in investigations for law enforcement purposes? No. The expert witness that testified on our behalf from Arizona was a gentleman that from UC Davis during his master's had that was what his thesis was written on, and had done some pretty extensive testing on multiple forms of the microstamping, because there was what they called the gear shape that had a unique shape to it that was embossed upon a cartridge. There was the alphanumerics, which would have been provided to you by DOJ, and it would not be your serial number. So the manufacturer would send the serial number, DOJ would say, well, here's our Rosetta Stone for the marking, and then send the marking, and that's what would go somehow into the gun. They've tried the firing pin, so where the firing pin actually embosses it into the primer. Anybody that reloads knows that's easily defeatable.
Yeah.
The other one was on the breech. So when the casing or the cartridge would ignite, the pressure would pressure form it onto that emblem or that shape or whatever they were going to go with. That would then be left behind indelibly on the brass. He found he could defeat that with, I think, is something as little as 12 strokes of a file, or rubbing it for a total of something like 10 to 15 seconds on concrete, and it destroyed the mark.
So initially started as stamping the case in two areas, but now it's just one now.
And then they reduced it to one. They saw the writing on the wall, in my belief, what the state saw. They were like, well, one, that is not feasible or practical.
Right.
Because now, if it was on the firing pin and something happens to that firing pin, if you've ever broken a firing pin like I have, you know that, right?
So that was my next question. Where the hell are we going to get these?
You'd have to get from the manufacturer. And it would have to be custom manufactured, to have to be then, assigned to the DOJ, or if a new one was assigned to you, now you may end up with two marks. It's a furball. It is. It's a mess trying to logically think your way through a use case of, well, that's fine if the gun keeps working. What if I break this part? What if I replace this part? What happens here? What are the steps that I have to take? And then even if everybody was okay with that and we're not, how is an overburdened Department of Justice going to handle and facilitate those requests when right now it's taken like 30 to 60, 90 days just to do a gun check for your CCW.
Wow.
So yeah.
So these 3 requirements came from the California Attorney General, or did it come from California Congress?
It came from the legislature. So
okay.
the legislature, they take up the mantle and they say, well, we're going to do this in the name of public safety. They passed the first version of the Unsafe Handgun Act, which said it has to be drop tested, it has to have a loaded chamber indicator, it has to have magazine disconnect. In a later revision update to that, they added the microstamping.
So the true function or the true goal of the Unsafe Handgun Act was to just initially stop like negligent discharge and stuff like that, right? Injuries.
That was the argument, and
okay.
that's something that you're going to go look for the viewers. If it's one thing what the law says, because they're going to say, well, here's something we're going to make a crime, or
okay.
here's something that we're going to make a statute. You have to abide by this, or a class of persons has to abide by this. And then it'll say you must do this, or this crime has this element, this element, this element.
Right.
What's beneficial for us is to go read the legislative intent. What are you trying to stop? What are you trying to prevent? And if it is, we're trying to prevent accidental gun deaths, or we're trying to prevent accidental discharges, property damage, or we're trying to keep, the children safe. They always argue we're trying to keep the kids safe. Then that's the intent of it. We know what we have to do, but what are you trying to prevent, or what are you trying to accomplish with the legislation? That's called legislative intent. So we looked at that. So when we look at that, that's what they're trying to prevent. Well, it would keep somebody who is not familiar with handguns, from discharging it. Well, if you're not familiar with handguns, you're not going to know what the hell a loaded chamber indicator on top of the gun is either.
Yes.
So you're not going to, if you don't know how to safely handle it, if you haven't been properly trained, the owner of the gun, that's something that I've preached is then the gun should be kept safe, locked up, unloaded.
Right.
If people are going to be around it, if people are going to be in your household, then they should be trained, and that's something that's been awesome as an instructor that we see is the families will come in. They want everybody taught. It's not some mysterious boogeyman that sits in the safe and like, watch out, man, you can't touch that, don't look at it. No, you can't make it a mystery. You've got to train people like how this thing works and when will it and when will it not, and train them on it appropriately. And you see the push from California to destroy that culture.
Yeah.
The 2571, AB 2571 was, I just saw an update from
yes.
CRPA was just looks like it was struck down. I haven't had a chance to read it, but it looks like we've got some movement toward and potentially a victory that and I forget the name of the plaintiff, it was a sports magazine, I believe, that finally, hopefully, is able to take that off because that hurt.
Yeah.
I watched some really good youth shooting clubs and youth educational clubs get destroyed over really poor legislation.
Yeah, I'm seeing that now.
So.
Absolutely. So at this point, you said enough is enough, and so you're standing up on your own 2 feet and taking on the system?
It is. It was, call it a crisis of conscience. Or, no, I work in this industry. I'm a firearms instructor. It's not even. It is not even my primary thing. I started this off as because I was bored.
Right.
Like 10 years ago, I was just all like, I'm sitting around the house. This is I got to go do something, and like, hey, I kind of know how to shoot, and it grew into what it is. The big, like it's a big facility we've got, and the classroom we're in, and everything else, and I have people that come in here that they get their training and.
Yeah.
This organization, it's self-sufficient, and it always will be, hopefully. I haven't taken money out of this company since I started it, but it's all.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I've been fortunate.
I look at the gun rules and the laws, and they are just going way over my head.
Yeah.
And trying to interpret them, I look toward to you to try to figure out and for you to explain them better to us. So what's the update on your case?
Well, the kind of the genesis of the case was sitting here looking at this and seeing the community and the some of the other entities that are out there that do the same thing I do, and like nobody's stepping up, and I'm like, oh, this is a problem, and I in good conscience can't sit here and have people feed revenue into this organization and not stand up for the rights and do everything else. And it was a phone call to Chuck Michelle. Him and I've had a relationship with him being the president of CRPA and being a chapter chair for him as well for grassroots. And I said, we've got Bruin, we got it in the bag, let's hit them hard. Here's what we've got. I'm a firearms instructor. We've got multiple facets of standing that we can fight this on. I put myself out there, let's make it happen. And I'm sure that probably in an internal conference, I got a call and they were like, this is going to happen. Here's the name of the case. It's Boland v. Bonta. Where are we at now? Well, with anything else, it follows the federal rules of civil procedure. So I know everybody gets anxious, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's another 2 weeks, and I see it all the time. Oh, 2 more weeks. That's not reality. It's not how the court system works, and it's not how we want the court system to work either. Ramrod, slipshod, cram it through there, and I want to be able to buy my guns in a week. It's not the reality. I know everybody wants it. We live in the day and age of that, immediate gratification. There's no what my mom would call delayed gratification. Like you start school, right? You don't see the result for 4 years. We get people that come into work that are, junior interns asking how come they don't have their own office. Like it's the same mentality. Right. It strikes us. I'm the same way too. I'm like, no.
Oh yeah.
There.
Well, for me it was 10. So.
Right. Yeah. So we. Once it gets filed, you're going to see kind of a progression. One, you get a complaint. So that's the first thing that drops. You get the complaint, it goes to the clerk, you get a case number, get your conformed copy. From that, the other side gets service. So they have to be notified of the case. It doesn't matter. Now they can waive it. They can waive service. They can total Rule 12 be it. We kind of talked about it earlier, where they can go in and appear and say we waive service and jump on the case quickly.
So that's not what they always want. Internal chess game going on between.
Yeah, and it's how the case is filed, and there's times where you look at the federal court system, what judge is taking what cases from what days,
right,
or from what week, or where they are in the rotation. And we're not going to file it this week. We're going to file it next week, and we're going to get that judge, and that judge was an appointee from a conservative president, and he's probably going to be more likely to rule on, or she's going to be more likely to rule on our side. So yeah, it's a total chess game. It's judge shopping. There's all kinds of stuff that goes into it. Well above me.
I read your case at least 4 times. I still don't understand the direction that it's going. But where are you now?
So where we're at now is all of that. The kind of do a thing and then pause because you have to. What we requested is it was a motion for a preliminary injunction. You'll see it written as PMI,
right.
MPI, motion for preliminary injunction. And what our side says is that our case is so strong that we're going to win. So in the meantime, we shouldn't have to bear the burden of our rights being infringed. So common in a lot of cases, you don't go into saying our case is weak. Like, well, we really don't know if we're going to win, and So you go in strong. We knew we were strong. We have Bruin backing us up. So we have a new analysis that has to happen with our case. That went in, and kind of unexpectedly, the judge came forth and said, well, I want to do an evidentiary hearing prior to issuing an injunction. Which is not impossible, not unheard of, but it is a little rare. So rallied the troops, means we're going to court, and we went to federal court on January, forget the date, I believe it was January. And we go in Ronald Reagan building. If you haven't been in there, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. Look at the, like if you get a chance, put a picture of one of the courtrooms up. It was one of the courtrooms we were in. That's where your tax dollars are going. Wow, to be a federal judge, holy cow, it's really nice inside. So we go in, and we brought our expert witnesses forward. We had members of the NSSF, we had a historian, we had a tool mark examiner from Arizona. That was a gentleman that had done the micro stamping. And then my testimony. And I showed you kind of the transcripts of my testimony and how that turned into a little bit of a battle of 22 pages of testimony. Which
that was a marathon.
It was, for being up there. And now there was a couple of witnesses from the tool mark. He was up there for quite a while, and I think we had a Cal DOJ agent that was in enforcement. He was up there for quite a while. But as far as just a plaintiff getting brought up there, and getting examined, cross-examined, and coming back and forth. I got objected to. I actually have an award over here on the wall of being objected to in federal court, which was really cool. I caught a hearsay objection. That was neat.
Was it exhausting?
It was overruled.
Or was it?
It was
exciting?
exhausting. It was. It's a little nerve-wracking. There's a focus. We're talking about things that I've lived a life of, and it's not necessarily opinion, but there are some facts that brought out, and there was some preparation, and I had multiple attorneys prepare me. Most importantly, my private attorney.
Yeah.
That prepared me, Robert, that really kind of said, this is how this works, and here's what you're going to face, and here's kind of the strategies versus here's the questions I need to ask you, and this is this is what we're looking what we're looking to accomplish with these questions. So if you provide the answers, we'll be good. So then the state gets a shot at you.
Sounds like the suit fit pretty well.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So the state gets up there, and you see the state's questions, and there was some kind of interesting that got brought up. The judge inquired as well, asking not only about casings left behind that had been microstamped and what may be the ultimate outcome. And there's already some problems. A gentleman that we shoot with out of Prado, that's a LA homicide detective, has seen a version of this already where they'll come up to a shooting and there's multiple casings out there from multiple different firearms. There's 38s
Hundreds.
and 40s and hundreds. They just throw a Ziploc
absolutely.
bag of cases out there. That's absent microstamping. Add microstamping, and now all of a sudden I get a knock on the door inquiring about this, shell casing I left behind at a range somewhere, and now I'm a suspect in a homicide, and now they have to clear me. Not, one, it's an inconvenience to me. I wouldn't like to be thought of like that or have my name in, Klutz as a person of interest.
Absolutely.
But think about law enforcement. Now we got to go chase down all these casings.
Yeah.
So you've got 48 hours to try to figure this out at your best shot. And now all of a sudden you're chased, one, I've got to get the answer from DOJ on this microstamp. What gun does it come back to? Okay, now tell us who owns this gun. Okay, let's go visit this person. Where's the gun? Well, it's in my safe. And, okay, well, can we see it? Well, now there's an intrusion. There's a Fourth Amendment issue. Law enforcement's sitting there chasing dead end, be like, well, here's the gun. Is he a suspect? Is he not?
Right.
Do we seize the gun? Do we ballistically test it? And it's just, you end up with, even if you threw 5 shell casings out there, think about the resources. And it's in the hundreds.
How do you prove that?
Yeah, how do you prove it? So that was the argument.
How does the ballistics and the casings come together? Are they going to just try to add those together to try to...
it's one of those, you look at the state's argument saying, well, it helps in law enforcement investigations, and how?
Right.
How does this help? Oh, well, we know who owns the gun. No. You know who owns the gun that fired that casing, but not here. So how do you differentiate? Well, we haven't thought that far. Well, that's a huge burden to put on the people of California to bear that, to say, well, you don't even know what the end result is of your investigation.
Is it a usual thing to just throw out a law and then let us deal with it?
Yeah, there's no fallout. There's no repercussions for it. You look 2571. Well, you can't advertise to an 18-year-old or anybody younger than 18.
Yes.
Youth advertising, and you're like, well, what is advertise? Well, showing them anything to do with guns.
Yes.
Well, if I walk into a grocery store and I have my company logo that has shell casings on it or cartridges on it in my advertising, well, yeah, it's advertising for a business that does firearms. So I'm potentially liable for everybody under the age of 18 that sees it. Can you explain this a little further? Because the legislation, one, sucks. Two, is not very well written.
Right.
And potentially puts everybody at liability. Puts the company at liability, puts the person wearing it, the person that exposed them, which could be the parent, the store that allowed me in.
Yeah.
I think there's the potential slippery slope logic is certainly there for it. So it's just poorly written. I don't know, man. Like, look who we're voting in. Like, there should be concern.
Wow. So I mean that's I'm sure this can go on for forever. What can we do as responsible gun owners do to help support this?
Be aware. That's the first step. Awareness. It's kind of like what's the first step to treatment? Is admitting you have a problem, right? Yeah. So same thing.
Right.
Yeah, same thing is admitting that you don't know. That's the first step. The second one, or following that, would be educate yourself. And this isn't something that we need It's not sitting down in the law library and going through articles.
Right.
It's finding reliable sources, authoritative sources. I do have a close relationship with CRPA, so I'll tout them for their educational efforts in legislative and court. So, like, what's coming up? What is, where is this proposed legislation, whether an assembly bill, whether it's a Senate bill on the state level? They do cover some of the city ordinances that do hit, like Ventura, and some of the other ones kind of ran into some 2A issues as well. And they'll cover all of that. How is this going to impact you? What is this going to do? What are we talking about? There'll be ones in there that may not, like, well, you can't buy body armor. This is going to be a bill that says you can't buy body armor. Well, I don't wear body armor. I don't care. Okay, well, but there's people that do. Or hunting, and you'd be surprised how the hunting rights in the state of California really kind of boil away to gun rights. Because
Yes.
if they can get rid of, you can't hunt any animal with a long gun in the state of California, and that gets stripped away. What's the purpose of having a long gun in California? Now that gets attacked. Because right now, some of the only things that are holding up some of our gun rights is the way that they're used and protecting the way that they're used.
Right.
You strip that away, then all of a sudden there's no reason for it. The argument becomes more difficult for us. But educating yourself on that, educating yourselves in the court reports, where are these cases? My case, Duncan, that's Virginia Duncan's case for the magazines.
Yep.
Kim Rohde for the ammunition. Sorry, I forgot your name, guys. The sports magazine for the 2571. And where are these cases? What can we do to support them? My case is being supported by a California Rifle Pistol Association. They're the one financing it, as well as Second Amendment Foundation.
So
They've contributed.
CRPA would be a great resource then.
It is. It's a good resource just for education. You don't have to go be a member of them to get the education benefit from them.
Beautiful.
For kind of where we're at with these things. If you donate, awesome. If you just learn, that's awesome too. Usually that's compelling enough. And as I've always said, anybody that's been around me, look into who you donate to. There's groups I support, there's groups I don't support. I look past the first layer of the onion to see really kind of what's going on, and are you filing fundraising lawsuits, or are you actually taking people to task? Who's winning?
Yes.
And I'm going to support the people who are winning or who have the best chance of winning. And getting as deep as to reading how you wrote your complaint and what you're standing and what is really the nuts and bolts and under the hood of your lawsuit, and how are you arguing this?
Wow.
Instead of just kind of a, I hate to use the term prima facie lawsuit to say that we're going to win anyways, but you look at it and it kind of reminds me of the time, like when I was a consultant, there was always the chatter of, there may not be any money in fixing the problem, but there's a lot of money in prolonging it.
Yeah.
And it really makes you wonder, as long as some of these things drag out, just because of poorly written complaints or poorly argued appeals, like, are you really trying to drag this out longer than it needs to be?
Which is quite a few.
And it seems to be quite a few.
Isn't that a strategy?
Well, the state wants to drag it out as long as they can, because at some point you're going to hit a point of attrition where you don't have any more money.
Right.
So you can drain the war chest just with legal tricks and gimmicks, because if you break it down, if I'm supporting a gun rights group, I'm giving my disposable income to the gun rights group to fight the state who's fighting that case using my tax money. So I'm literally paying for both sides of the lawsuit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a proxy war that I'm paying for both sides. I'm supplying weapons to both sides. So, and there's nothing we can do with one side and a choice that we make on the other. And, one is, I don't pay taxes. They have a long arm that can come get me. I don't, pay for gun rights, and, they just go away.
Right.
So it's got us caught up in this mix. And unfortunately, in my opinion, there's some charlatans that have gotten involved in this, because they see it's like after every natural disaster, there's emails and text messages going out to, oh my gosh, you got to donate. And
has to be.
Yeah, it's got to be there, and then all of a sudden you see them drive and wither away, or there's just no action, or a poorly written complaint, or a poorly argued case. And that's a huge concern, because you're taking away money from potentially one that's winning and giving it to somebody that's literally just making himself rich.
Wow. Well, Lance, you're a wealth of knowledge. Thank you very much for taking the time to see us. So, but good luck with your civil thing, or
Yep.
right?
Yeah,
And,
absolutely. Yeah.
anything that you guys can do to help support Lance and CRPA, I mean, that'd be very much welcome, right?
For sure.
So-
Absolutely. Yeah, if you go for CRPA, crpa.org, that'll get you the first page. You'll see, you can say, well, I want this to go directly to one particular lawsuit, or I just, I want to get a membership and just support the organization. It all kind of goes into the same war chest. And again, not trying to make a pitch for anybody, but definitely check out who you're supporting to make sure they're winning for you. And that's kind of across the board.
Thank you very much. Lance Boland from Fast OC, fighting for his as well as your defensive gun rights.